doing peace signs.
Yeah, we're doing these signs. Awesome. Hi, everyone. We are live. Very excited to have Tim here with us today. There is a slight delay between what we see on LinkedIn versus what we see here, but we'll see all your comments below. As we get started, we would love to start with an icebreaker question is, do you consider yourself an introvert or extrovert? Or not sure? And also, like, feel free to comment what country you're in. I'm just gonna double check to make sure it is live on our lovely LinkedIn page. And I guess I will answer. Oh, awesome. We are live. Cool. Yeah, let us know in the comments if you would identify yourself as an extrovert or introvert and maybe like what country you're in, where you're tuning in from over the world. I would consider myself and 40% introvert and 60% extrovert. I feel like I thrive in situations where I get to talk to a lot of people, but I also need alone time to process my thoughts and make decisions. How about you, Tim? Do you feel like you've been mainly an introvert all your life or have flip-flopped between each two?
I think it really depends on who you are most of the time. I think when it comes to things like definitions, people like to think that they are one kind of personality all of the time. But really, we are different people in different contexts, in different environments, and it depends on who is around us at the time. So I could be the biggest extrovert when I'm with my closest friends over dinner, but you put me in a room where we're networking in a room full of strangers, and I'll be the biggest introvert. So it really
Mhm.
depends. And all
Yeah.
of those versions of the person are all me. They're all different parts of me.
Yeah, I love that. It depends, just like UX design. We have like 150 people live on LinkedIn. Hi, everyone. Welcome. There's a slight delay until what you see here on LinkedIn, but would love to know in the chat, do you consider yourself an introvert or extrovert? Maybe provide some examples, and then we'll get started real soon. Hi, everyone. Welcome. I am so excited to be here today with Tim on quiet leadership for introverts, something that I feel like so many buddies here would find value of. And I'm Grace. I founded Design Buddies, and back in April 2020, since then we've grown a lot. Our goal is to help y'all level up in your design career, whether that's improving your skills, hosting events, connecting you with opportunities, and helping y'all level up in your career today. I'm a UX designer by trade. I'm also a content creator, and I actually just left my day job. This is my last week in corporate. Um, this is the first time saying it online, actually. I've been telling you about my personal life, but yeah, my last week in corporate, I'm so excited to bring more community building content, design, traveling the world further. So stay tuned on that. And this topic, I'm so excited to have Tim with us today. Tim Yo, pronounced like Yo, what is up? Is the chief introvert of the Quiet Achiever. He coaches and runs courses to help quiet achievers have an impact at work without pretending to be extroverts. Tim spent 18 years as a designer and design leader, most recently as a design director at IBM. Previously, Tim was the head of UX and design at fintech startups Finder, OFX, and Prospa, where he hired, established, and scaled design teams from scratch. Best known for saying complex things simply, he is also a keynote speaker, bookbinder, and currently working remotely and writing his book due 2024 from his farm in Adelaide, Australia, with his partner and the fluffiest old English sheepdog ever. Welcome, Tim. And Tim is also from Singapore, where my dad is also from. So we love Singapore, and really excited to have you on. So let you take it away.
Well, Grace, thank you so much for the opportunity. And for the introverts and the extroverts and the ambiverts that are watching this, welcome. Um, my name is Tim Yeo, and for the last 40 plus years, I've been an introvert. And for me, this is what introversion feels like. Small talk is really hard for me. So, like Grace had mentioned earlier, I grew up in Singapore, And for anyone that's ever lived in Asia or traveled to Asia, you will probably agree. People back home, we don't really talk to random strangers on the street. Most of us will be staring at our book or staring at our phones, like most people would. But about 12 years ago, I moved to Sydney, Australia, which is a Western society. And now I live in Adelaide. And you could be in a queue waiting for a bus, a tram, a train, even the toilet. Somehow, small talk just creeps out on you when you least expect it. So I had to learn to talk to people about the weather, asking how they are, what their plans are for the weekend. In the beginning, when people asked me how I was, I actually told them. And then I quickly realized that I was probably oversharing, or they were not that interested to begin with. They were just simply saying hi. Because for me, too much social interaction is exhausting. Even if it's social interactions that are ones that I like with friends and family. If this particular talk was done in real life in a big room with a lots of people, I would probably need to step away at the end of it to have some quiet time to recharge. Now, there's a few myths about introversion that I would like to dispel. Firstly, introversion is not about being shy. Being shy is a fear of social judgment, which means even an extrovert can be shy. Rather, introversion and extroversion is about how we respond to stimulation, where stimulation could be social interactions, it could be in a noisy environment, or if you're working in an open plan office, for example. So, for an introvert to operate at their best, they require an environment that has less stimulation, and it's vice versa for extroverts. Next, introversion and extroversion is not an absolute. How an introvert or an extrovert behaves depends on the context, the environment, and the people that are around you at that time. No one is truly an introvert or an extrovert all of the time. Now, back in 2012, Susan Cain gave a TED talk called The Power of Introverts. Susan really inspired this talk of mine that I started giving. She said that when she was growing up, she felt like her quiet, introverted way was wrong. Wrong. I mean, imagine that. Imagine growing up thinking that the way that you are is wrong. She also said that we live in a world where the extrovert ideal is desired. And as a design leader, this certainly feels true to me. Because when people paint a picture of what they expect a leader to look like, it often looks something like this. A leader commands the center of attention. A leader is outgoing, is talkative, is dominant. A leader is able to deliver charismatic speeches, rallying large audiences at the drop of a hat. A leader is, in essence, an extrovert. Now, I'm not saying that this is a bad way to lead. I'm saying that this is not the only way to lead, and certainly not all the time. Which then begs the question, if we can accept that the world is the way that it is, a world that desires extroverts, then how can we, as an introverted design leader or leader, operate successfully within it? If you are an introvert and you are happy in an individual contributor role, you can probably get away with focusing on pushing pixels. But if you want to lead, especially people leadership, then your pixels are now people. And you can't push people the same way that you push pixels. It just doesn't work. So, how can an introverted leader succeed? Now, the answer to this question is not be more extroverted. I've tried that, it's lame, and it always felt unnatural. Instead, the techniques that I'll be sharing with you have actually allowed me to remain my true authentic self. Or, in other words, how can we use our introverted ways not as a flaw, not as if there is something wrong with us, but to use our introverted ways as a superpower. Now, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the distributed, the hybrid world that we live and work in today. The world that we're working in today has changed. And even though the lucky ones amongst us might find ourselves in good health and we still have a job, those same expectations that people have, their norms and their projected beliefs, of what a leader actually looks like, it still persists. And it persists through these tiny lenses of our webcams on our laptops, where we look our best from our waist up on video calls, just like this one, through to the peers that we work with day to day and the teams that we lead. Case in point, I started a new role back in April 2020. And I started that role at the start of the COVID pandemic. And I started that role fully remote, leading a team in a company that was also newly remote. All of a sudden, working remotely was the new normal. I had never worked remote up until that point. I had never led a remote team. And so much of the leadership that I did before, I felt like I did it when I was in person. It was peer to peer, it was face to face, it was being in the room to read the room. And just like that, all of that was gone. So back then, I was wondering, in this new normal, will I, as an introverted leader, thrive or wilt? Will this new normal be a boom or will it be a bust for introverts like me? And will my techniques, my introverted superpowers, will they still serve me well in a fully remote world? The answer is yes, with a few small tweaks. So, in this version of the talk, I'll be sharing with you new techniques that I've learned to lead as an introvert in a world that works remote. And I'll be sharing these techniques with you over 4 areas. There'll be meetings, team management, social media, and then lastly, networking. Everybody loves meetings, right? You look at your calendar, if there's some white space there, great. There's time for another meeting. Now, by far, my favorite type of meeting has to be one on ones. Because as an introvert, you only have to focus on one person, not a group of people that are competing for attention. And more importantly, when you have a one on one, it is away from the public eye. People are more open to being wrong when no one else is looking. They are also more open to tell you what they really think when nobody else is listening. And when you're working remote, one on ones are going to be more important than ever. Bumping into someone at the water cooler or bumping into them at the pantry, that's just stuff that doesn't happen anymore because you're working remote. You can't just turn your chair around and ask somebody a quick question because you're no longer in the same room. So you have to schedule your one on ones with peers and your leaders intentionally so that staying connected is not left to chance. The next thing you can do is to arrive at virtual meetings early. Now, in real life, meetings tend to happen in rooms, at tables, where you're sitting side by side or across from each other. Now, meetings in real life are bound by time and space, right? Sometimes you just can't get to your next meeting quick enough because the next meeting is going to be 3 floors up in a different building. But this is not true when you're working remotely. When you're remote, meetings happen virtually. Your next meeting is literally a click away. And the one thing that remains true about meetings in real life and when you're working remotely is that there will always be someone who is late. Someone whose arrival that you're waiting for so that the meeting can finally begin. Now, there's no point in starting the meeting because you're just going to have to repeat what you said all over again when that late person finally arrives. So then you might be wondering, why should I arrive early then? You arrive early because in this small pocket of time, you are alone with the punctual attendees. Not everyone is going to be arriving at the same time. Sometimes, so you want to actually be early so that it gives you this precious one-on-one time to connect with the people that you work with. Sometimes it's going to be your teammates who are early. Other times it's going to be your boss or maybe your boss's boss. You can practice small talk. You can ask them what they had for lunch. Is that a new shirt? How did your partner's interview go? Did the baby sleep through the night finally? These small minutes between the meetings are when people actually speak a lot more freely, when there's nobody else there to listen. It is an opportunity for you to connect at a much more human level. So, by arriving early, you get to ask people how they truly are, especially when you're working remote. And you will never have that opportunity if you arrive late. So, arrive at virtual meetings early. Now, sometimes you find yourself in a meeting where somebody asks a question, and it's a really interesting question, right? It's one that's really caught your interest, and your brain is on it, and the gears are turning, and then you kind of see the shape of your answer. It's cloudy, it's not fully formed. And then all of a sudden, somebody in the room calls out your name and says, "Hey, Tim, what do you think?" And then all of a sudden, you can feel the blood draining from your face. If your mind was racing before, it's racing even faster now. You are not ready. Your reply is not ready. It's not fully formed. That great idea that was starting to form inside your brain, poof, it's gone. You don't even know what you want to say. You make some excuses, maybe you make some weird nervous noises, and then the attention passes onto somebody else. And you are kicking yourself for not speaking up. Now, this comes up a lot in the conversations I have with people that I'm coaching. How do you actually speak up before you are ready? Well, one way to do it is you need to give yourself permission to speak up, a license to speak up before you're ready. And that license could sound something like this. This might sound really silly. It's not fully formed, but I'm going to share it. I'm going to say it out loud anyways. You probably know this already, but I'm going to share it with what I have so far. What I'm about to say is not fully formed yet, but this is what has come to mind so far. Now, by prefacing what you're about to say, this it gives you the permission, it serves as a license for you to actually say it, even though you are not really 100% ready, or even the idea is not fully formed. Maybe you're not even close to being ready, right? Maybe you actually do need a little bit more time to actually process your thinking. But you know what? The microphone is now here with you and it's already passed to you. So in moments like this, you can say, you know what? I actually need a little bit more time to process what I'm thinking. I'm almost ready. Do you mind moving on to somebody else and then coming back to me next? You don't have to assume that when the microphone is passed to you that you have to speak up there and then. You can always pass it to somebody else and then come back to you next. Other times you are there and you are ready with something to say, but then something kind of holds you back. You've never really enjoyed the spotlight of other people's attention gazing upon you. But then what you have to say is important, and it's going to be very meaningful to this discussion. Now, in moments like this, you have to train yourself over time to raise your hand or to kind of signal that you have something that you want to say before your brain actually kicks in and starts making excuses not to speak up. Now, by actually signaling that you have something to say, your brain then quickly shifts from making excuses not to speak up. It switches to, all right, how am I going to say the thing that I want to say? The important thing here for you to realize is you were invited to the meeting for a reason. It's important to speak up because up until now, nobody can still read other people's minds yet. So to participate in a discussion is to be a team player. So you want to speak up to be a player on the team. Also, not everything has to be a meeting. Meetings are not always the best way to get things done. At a practical level, meetings are synchronous where all the attendees have to assemble at a fixed time. So even if you're successful at playing calendar Tetris and you find this one precious hour 2 weeks later where everyone can make it, you're probably still going to meet across time zones, and it's going to be too early or too late for someone on the call if you're working on a global team. Also, group meetings tend to be rife with social dynamics. There's a lot of politics, posturing, power. And some groups even encourage adversarial behavior, claiming that conflict actually leads to better decisions. Now, as introverts, we may not always get a turn at the microphone. And the louder voices on the call seem to say the most, but they don't always have the most to say. Meeting this way is not just bad for quiet people like us, it's bad for most of us. So, if not meetings, then what? You can use asynchronous communication methods to get things done. Async, you're probably doing async already if you're writing emails, Slack messages, or blog posts. Here's a few other things that you could do. Instead of having a 15-minute monologue during a meeting, why not present your point of view? Why not just record a short video of yourself presenting so that people can actually watch it in their own time? Now, whenever I say this, record a short video of yourself, I admit you are going to cringe the first few times you rewatch a video of yourself. And it may take a few tries before you actually get a good take. But as an introvert, when you think about it, you are not put on the spot to speak, or you're not interrupted mid sentence and you lose your train of thought. You can have all the time to reflect and deliver a thoughtful, polished presentation. When you rewatch a video of yourself as well, it's also a good way to get better at public speaking. That initial discomfort that you feel rewatching a video of yourself, that feeling will pass. And then you will start to notice some of the little tics and habits that you have when you speak. And all these things that you notice in your videos that you don't like, you can then fix, iterate, and improve. Now, I want to take a moment to talk about working hybrid. When people talk about, say, hybrid, what I end up seeing with a lot of people is that they are sitting in offices at their desks on Zoom calls. The difference is that you are in an office. You are not at home in the comfort of your sweatpants. The way that I see most people doing hybrid, I'm really not sure if it's working. And where most people are working under one roof was formerly the norm. That simply isn't true anymore. If you were part of a global team with people all around the world, having everyone under one roof was never going to be the case. I know that a lot of us are still trying to figure out how to make this hybrid thing work. But the important thing here is this: don't treat people who are not in the office as second class citizens. There's a saying, if one person on the team is remote, all of us are remote. And it could be simple things like using a virtual whiteboard rather than the physical one that's in the meeting room so that everyone can be on the same page. It might be having a really good microphone so that everyone can hear you clearly as if you're in the same room. Small things like this make a huge difference. Now, last point about meetings before we move on to the next topic. And I want to talk about high stakes meetings. A high stakes meeting is one where an ultimate decision has to be made. It's a go or no go decision. Chances are your boss is there and your boss's boss is there too. And the people that are in the room tend to have strong opinions and loud voices. So, as a quiet achiever, what do you do? Now, I've been to a few of these high stakes meetings, and I think there's a secret to them. And the secret is this: people who attend these meetings have most likely already made up their minds before the meeting itself. So the tactic here is to influence the outcome before the meeting, not during. So let's think about the audience here for a second. High stakes meetings usually involve senior executives, right? And senior executives usually have more experience. Senior executives also tend to have more things to focus on and less time to make decisions. Also, very few single decisions would truly break a company. It is usually a series of poor decisions that will break a company. Therefore, senior executives will lean onto their prior experience in order to help them make decisions quickly. Now, once these decisions are solidified in their minds, in my experience, it's very hard to change them. So, what do? You can have one on ones, hours, days, weeks, or even months before the meeting. How far in advance depends on how high the stakes are. The goal here is simple, it is to influence their thinking before they make up their minds. You get to explain your position, your rationale. You also get to ask them what they think. And if you're doing this one on one, people are more open to being wrong or to say, I don't know. You can think of it as like steering a container ship. You know, a container ship takes 20 full minutes to come to a full stop. So if you want to change the course of a container ship, you have to start steering early, really early. Now, as a final point, in the 3 years of the COVID pandemic that I've been working remotely, I've never felt more seen or more heard compared to the last 18 years of working in design in person. Whether you are on Zoom call, on Google Meet, or on WebEx, everyone is on an equal playing field. People actually have to take turns to speak. And speaking over one another just doesn't work anymore. If you put into practice some of these techniques in meetings, you will be heard and you will be seen. On the next topic on team management, when it comes to hiring, I've always tried to hire for our team's weaknesses. And as a quiet achiever, you are going to need some social butterflies on your team. Work is a team sport. And having social butterflies will help you build bridges across teams, across a company, and across our industry. These connections will help you extend your circles of influence and the impact that we can have on the work that we do. Now, it doesn't matter that working remotely makes it harder for butterflies to socialize. Butterflies will find a way to do what butterflies do. And it doesn't mean that every member on your team has to have a social butterfly, has to be a social butterfly. It also doesn't absolve you, the design leader, from the need to build your own relationships. But you know what? It certainly wouldn't hurt if this trait came very naturally to some of your people that you can lean on when you have maxed out on social interactions. Next, as a leader, play your role. People assume that when it comes to leadership styles, that we have one fixed style and it's fixed and it cannot be changed. That's what they assume. But the reality is we each have a preferred style of leading, and it's not fixed. And just like in our personal lives, we can each play different roles depending on the situation and the context that you're in. We might be the mother to our children. You might be a UI designer on your team. You might be the cook in the home kitchen preparing a dish for the first time. All these different roles, they are all played by the same one person. The trick here is to recognize the role that we need to play and to know what it takes to play that role successfully so that we can then adapt and then adopt those behaviors that we need to perform those roles and in those situations successfully. So play your role. And now we turn our attention to social media. In my opinion, social media is a gift from the introvert gods. Before public speaking like this was probably one of the best ways for us to broadcast our thoughts and ideas. But introverts, we don't respond to public speaking as well as extroverts do. But with social media, we quiet achievers can reach across continents, across time zones, all on our own terms, from behind the safety of our screen. And at no time has social media been more important for us than now. So if you wanted to argue with Jared Spool, for example, about why everyone is not a designer, you can just tweet him. All of a sudden, all the people that we respect are right there at our fingertips. And if you're a quiet achiever like me, a handful of deep, meaningful conversations will mean so much more than plenty of shallow, forgettable ones. Also, if these conversations that you have, if they happen in public channels, they represent your thought leadership. You are what you write, share, and tweet. What you say and how you say it will represent who you are. So, how do you start to have visibility and influence on social media as an introvert? Here are a few things you can do. First thing you have to realize is not everything has to be a blog post, right? People have this false expectation that if you want to be a thought leader, everything that you post has to be an essay, an article, a thesis, a book. The reality is that most of us don't have the time or the headspace for everything that we write to be long form. You can think of your content that you post in three sizes, right? Small, medium, large. Small could be just by liking or adding a comment on somebody's post and offering a point of view. Medium could be a review to an article that you read that somebody else had written and now resharing with your point of view. And it could also, and then finally, you have something that's longer form, a large. By actually varying the size of the content that you make, you give yourself more options in the quantity of content that you create without sacrificing the quality. Now, final point on social media, I wanted to talk about the common limiting beliefs that I've heard about not sharing or not speaking up on social media. There are things that I've heard, they sound like, I don't have enough experience. Maybe once I've worked longer in this industry, people will pay attention. What I want to say, other people have already said it before. It's not new. No one's going to listen to what I'm going to say. These are some of the things that I've heard. Now, what I have to say to you is if what you have to say is true to you, it's authentic, and it comes straight from your heart, then you will have an audience. There are people out there who need to hear what you have to say. The best advice I can give you is this. Your perspective is always unique and it's always interesting. You just have to say it. And now we arrive at every introvert's favorite activity, networking. Oh my gosh, how much do we introverts love networking? Networking is just one of those activities that somehow magically combines all of the things that we quiet achievers do not enjoy. And pre COVID, it usually happens like this, right? You arrive in a room full of strangers. You grab a drink and then you stand awkwardly on the side, quietly scanning the room, hoping that somebody will make eye contact with you. You see others just like you, scattered around the perimeter of the room, but you dread having to make small talk again. So you just stand there with your drink in hand and you stare at your phone. Now, clearly, networking does not come naturally to me. And since working remotely, I no longer have to make excuses to not attend networking events anymore. But nonetheless, I knew that it was important as a leader to extend my network. Because for me, the goal of networking is simple. The goal of networking is resourcefulness. It is to grow the pool of people that I know, who I can help, and who can help me. It's something that I needed to do to become a better leader. So, if not networking like that, then what else can we do? Here are a few techniques. If you are going to network in person, do your pre work about attendees that you like to meet. Some events like meetups and conferences, they have a list of attendees. You can go through the list, pick out the people that you do want to meet and talk to. You can look them up online and you can say hi on Twitter or LinkedIn, you know, so that once you actually meet up at the conference or the event itself, you're no longer strangers. You've already said hi online. Next, you want to always be networking methodically and consistently. Extroverts generally gain energy from interactions with people. But then we introverts, we lose energy, even if the conversations are stimulating. So the trick here is to actually be consistent and methodical about your networking. You need to have a system. You could spend 15 minutes of your morning just serendipitously stumbling onto what people are saying or talking about on LinkedIn or Twitter. You can reach out to them, you can join the conversation, you can add a comment. If they are keen, you might even exchange direct DMs or catch up over a video phone call one on one. By being methodical, by being consistent, you don't leave networking to chance. Networking this way, 15 minutes every morning or afternoon, it is actually less draining for me compared to doing 1 hour circulating a room full of strangers once a month. Also, you don't just network with people who can help you. Reach out to people that you can help too. This next technique is a bit of a Jedi mind trick. I learned it from someone else. What if, when you're networking, you pretended that it's user research? By pretending that it's user research, a collection of strangers suddenly turns into opportunities to learn about people. Who are they? What do they do? Why are they here? What do they want to get out of this event? Maybe I can help them. Maybe they can help me. Through this lens, by pretending that it's user research, these small talk questions come a lot more naturally. You just have to remember not to ask questions all the time, because then it will feel like an interrogation rather than a conversation. And when you're networking, you have to have some measurable output. It might be exchanging contact details, adding a person on LinkedIn or Twitter. You got to remember the goal of networking is to become more resourceful by growing the pool of people that you know. You can't do that if you don't know how to contact the person again when you actually need them. So to give you an example, if you're using LinkedIn on your phone, if it's an iOS phone, this is what it looks like. If you open it up and you actually click on search at the top, you notice that there is a very small little QR code on the top right. If you're at a networking event and you want to exchange contacts with another person, you can simply click on the QR code and the other person just has to scan that code and then you'll be connected. Now, on this next screen, you'll probably see the biggest QR code on your screens that you'll see today. This QR code, if you want to, I'm going to leave it out on the screen for a second. But if you feel like it, feel free to scan this code and you will follow me on LinkedIn. The kind of content I post is really about quiet leadership and how to have tiny habits to have impact at work without pretending to be experts. Now, a few more slides about how to network. Now, if you've made all this effort to actually get to know this one person, you genuinely like this person, you can actually see yourself hanging out with them. Interesting people will probably know other interesting people as well. So why stop at one? When you're networking, don't stop at one. You can ask your new connection to introduce you to two other people that you should meet, and you can do the same. Next, have an exit script. Some conversations, they come to a natural end. We just run out of things to talk about. What you must know is that this is totally okay. Rather than awkward silences, you can have an exit script so that you can leave and start another conversation with somebody else more interesting. Practice, practice, practice your exit script. Repeat it until it comes naturally. And it can sound something like this. Let's say the person's name is John. Say, hey, John, I really enjoyed chatting with you. And it feels like we got a lot in common. Are there two other interesting people that you could introduce me to? I'm very happy to do the same. And who says networking has to be a group activity? Now more than ever, video calls are the new normal. You can reach out to people that you like to meet and then schedule a time to actually catch up and talk shop. One-on-ones are a great way to get to know each other better. Now, before I wrap up, I wanted to take a quick opportunity to share with you a little bit about what we do at the Quiet Achiever. This talk that I just given, it started as a talk that I gave at conferences about 4 or 5 years ago. And doing this talk in person is very tiring. It takes a lot of practice. It drains a lot of energy. But every time that I gave it, the response after was people took a lot away from it. So at the time, I tried to think, what other things could I do to try and help more introverts like me, to give them tiny habits to have impact at work, where they don't have to struggle, don't have to pretend to be an extrovert. So that's how the Quiet Achiever was born about 4 or 5 years ago. We cover topics like how to introduce yourself, how to perform in meetings, how to do public speaking well, how to prepare and perform in interviews, how to network, how to handle difficult conversations, how to facilitate better meetings and workshops, how to be more visible in your organization, how to manage and lead as a quiet leader, how to say no politely. All these are things that I struggled with before, and a lot of the people that I've coached struggle with as well. How to make small talk. So, in the time that we've started this community, we're about 200 plus members around the world. Not as big as Design Buddies, but we're growing every day. The courses that we do in these topics, they're all online, they're all on demand. You also have practice exercises of recording short videos of yourself, posting and getting feedback. And you can also see how other people practice their exercises as well. At the end, you get a course certificate. You also get to listen to some of the guest speakers from famous introverts who you might not have known were introverts themselves. If all of this sounds interesting to you, you can scan the QR code or you can just type in the Quiet Achiever. It's probably one of the top links on Google. You can also scan this QR code to take you straight to the courses, or you can go to URL at the bottom. Something else that I've been working on is a book. It's called The Quiet Achiever. I thought that I would be able to launch this book in early 2024, but I'm quickly discovering that editing is taking a lot of effort. If you look at this cover, this was cover, there are spelling errors, and there's a reason for that. The cover is actually AI generated. To give me some ideas of what the actual cover could look like, if you are interested in this book, scan the QR code, put in the email address, and be one of the first to know. And as part of this Design Buddies event, one of the courses that I run is called Interviews for Introverts. We give you some practical tips to prepare with confidence so that you can get the job that you deserve. And we're giving out two all expense paid scholarships. A scholarship is simple. It means you get to attend the course now for free. But once you do land your full-time job, I know that times are hard right now, but once you do land your full-time job, you can then pay back the course fee so that somebody else can then attend that course for free. If this sounds interesting to you, please scan that QR code and fill in the form and apply for the scholarship now. We'll announce the winners in about a week's time. So as we wrap up, I wanted to bring our attention back to Susan Cain's talk and the extrovert ideal. You know, the world that we live in may continue to favor extroverts as leaders. And I hope that in this short time, I've convinced you that we as introverts, as quiet achievers, that we also have our place in this world as effective leaders as well. You know, this talk, it was never intended to be introverts versus extroverts. That wasn't the intent at all. I think that we all have a role to play. And I hope that the techniques that I've shared can be put to good use by introverts and extroverts alike. So I'll leave you with this quote that I love. You know, just because I'm quiet doesn't mean I have nothing to say. Introversion is not a flaw. It is not a disability. It's a superpower. And I hope you will let your superpower shine. Thank you.
Awesome. That was amazing. I really appreciate that. I like the exit strategy as well because, networking events sometimes you can be in conversations and missing out a lot of opportunities to like connect with a lot of people as well. Yeah, now we're taking some questions in the chat. feel free to drop any. I see some already. I would say on the exit strategy, one thing that I've started doing lately is to say, "It was great chatting with you. I'm gonna go circulate." Just like things like that, and yeah. So Patty asks, does anyone else feel like in a situation where you're waiting to speak up and that you're trying to not speak over someone else? I find that I miss my opportunity to speak while being mindful of that. Yeah, like because I remember you mentioned how like always having something to say and just kind of like waiting to be called on, but like sometimes like people, myself included as well. Like, I just don't wanna, like, interrupt or be rude, but also wanna make sure my point gets across as well because I think it's valuable.
Mm. It happens a lot, especially in remote meetings. And one of the ways that I found a way around this is a lot of virtual meeting apps actually have a chat as well. The thing that we have to do that's different is you actually can accept that chat messages are also a primary way of communication, even though video and audio is going to be the main way that you communicate, right? So if somebody is speaking on your video conference call, only one person can speak at any one time. You can always send a chat message and share what you think. You can use your chat to actually say, hey, I got something to share. Maybe when you're done, can I have 2 minutes to share it? Or you can simply type out the point of view that you have. The change that we have to make is to actually accept chat as a primary method of communication as well. So that way,
Mhm,
if somebody is speaking live, you don't have to interrupt them. You can actually post what you think on chat. And then later on, people can circle back and bring up what you have to share.
mhm. Yeah, I love that. I love the chat feature. I use it all the time. What about, like, in person, in real life meetings with no chat feature? How would you go about that?
You can wait for natural lulls in the conversation, right? First of all, you can always signal. For me, sometimes, you can see the look on people's faces and where they have something to say, but they can't find the right time to say. Sometimes if you can read the room, that's great. Other times you have to be a little bit more obvious and maybe raise your hand. And the key here is really to work out a way of actually communicating that suits your team. Sometimes there are some teams, they just speak over each other. They don't realize that the way that they behave, the way that they operate in the team can actually be designed as well. You can actually ask yourself, what kind of team do I want to be? Do I want to work in a team where people actually shout on top of each other in order to be heard? Or maybe we want to be the kind of team where somebody is speaking, we let them finish, and then when they're done, we actually have our turn to speak. All these norms, all these ways of actually working, we don't think about it. We just kind of accept that this is the way that the team is. But actually, you can actually design the way that you want to operate. And then you can be the kind of team and work the way your team wants to work.
Yeah, I like that. I guess it kind of depends on the team and looking for roles in the conversation, or maybe following up afterwards as well. I'm also, like, trying to work in finding that balance too, because I tend to, like, interrupt, and I try not to, or sometimes I don't know. It's either, like, interrupt or, like, don't really know when to do. Um, yeah, we have 10 more minutes if anyone has any questions. Oh, another question, interesting, about networking from LinkedIn user is, what are some effective ways to keep networking without coming across as pushy or self-serving?
Um, a lot of times when I talk to people about networking, they tell me things like networking feels dirty. It feels very self serving. I want to get a job with this person. I want something from them. I think that's one way to look at networking, but there's another way, right? Networking is really about making more dots, right? Making more connections. When you're actually talking to this new person that you've never met before, by right, you should be fully focused and actually understanding what's so special about this dot. You want to talk about who this person is, what are their interests, where are they working, and all these things. You're not trying to actually connect the dots. Can this person find me a job? That connecting of the dots is something that you do after, right? You do that in hindsight. When you're being present, you're talking to this person, all you're trying to do is to find all the interesting things about this new connection that you've made. You can only connect the dots after the fact in hindsight. So when you're actually networking, I take a genuine interest in the person, what they are, what their interests are, what they're going through right now. And then you only connect the dots later on.
Yeah, I like that, kind of focusing in the moment and trying to learn more of the person, just, like, asking questions about each other, making friends, and then later finding ways you can help each other out or make introductions or anything, and just, like, coming in without any expectations, just getting to know the other person and seeing if there's a mutual interest. If there is, great, if
Mm,
there's not, that's okay, there's plenty of people out there, and you're not gonna vibe with everyone too. And that's, like, a
mm,
big insecurity I used to have, it's like, "Oh, if I feel like I had to, like, talk to every single person in the room or, like, had to make everyone, like me, and if it's not it's, like, impossible to chase that, so, yeah, just going in just, like, for fun. That's what first helped
mm.
me. Um, Tiffany asks oh, hi, Tiffany. Is there any way to help with memory issues when it comes to interview and presentations? Is it okay to bring notes?
Um,
Mhm. I think this comes
I
with,
think the
like,
general
job interviews. Mhm.
job interviews are hard. They are high stakes conversations. You apply for a job, you really want that job. The best advice I can give you is just one word, which is practice. Um, a lot of people start off interviews and they feel like they prepared. They had their portfolio, their slide deck ready. They have all the details of the work ready to go. And then they go into the interview and they start talking. And they start talking about everything that they've done. And then before you know it, they've been having a monologue for 30 minutes. During that time, they're probably looking at the interviewers and they can see that maybe some of the interviewers are losing interest. They've just had 30 minutes of just a monologue. And I think there's a better way of actually doing this. You can actually practice your introduction script of who you are, your career, stuff that you've done, just the highlights, just like a trailer of a movie. You can do all of that in less than 5 minutes. And then you practice that 5 minutes very well. And that's the part that you practice, practice before you go into interview. You don't just have to rely on talking. You can show and tell. Most people just rely on voice. But the key here is, the work that we do in design tends to be a very visual medium. So showing and telling is a very natural thing to do. The more senses that you can use, the better it is to actually communicate your point of view. And when you have something visual, you can also serve as that support, that reliance on your memory. You don't have to memorize everything because you do have something on the screen to jog your memory as well. And when I say practice, I literally mean saying your 5 minute introduction again and again and again and again and again to the point where it's almost second nature. Because again, an interview is a high stakes situation. You can expect your emotions to be very heightened. So, what you want to do is the last thing you want to be worrying about is what you want to say. And all this practice you can do beforehand. Nobody's watching you. You're on your own at home in front of your computer, practicing your introduction, your story that you want to tell. And then when you go into the interview, you can focus on everything else that is happening within the room. So if I could give you any one advice, practice your introduction, keep it less than 5 minutes, show and tell.
Mhm. Yeah, practice and get feedback. You can record yourself, ask other people for feedback, other like design professionals and design buddies, or your friends, your parents, classmates, professors, and for feedback as well. Um, Next question is adding on to Tiffany's question. What should we do if the person who we're speaking with doesn't follow up with more questions or only gives short answers?
Always go into an interview with questions of your own. So sometimes, here's the thing about interviews and interviewers. In the time that I've worked in design over the last 18, 19 years, I never went to interview school. No one really teaches you how to interview. People just kind of, learn it on the job. They learn it from their previous managers. So sometimes there's a natural lull. People just don't know what to ask anymore. It's a great opportunity for you to ask questions that you have about the role. And you can, the more, the more questions you have, the more insightful it's your opportunity to learn about the team, the company, the person, the role. So always go into these interviews with questions that you want to ask. It is an opportunity for you to learn more about the role so you can make a better decision whether you want to actually take on this role if it's offered to you or not. So go in with questions and you can ask them during those lulls in conversations.
Mhm. Yeah, like, I guess on interview questions, I like to ask them to learn more about them and, like, what they're working on and what they're interested in, like, what are the main problems you're solving? What are your main priorities? Or, like, what is something you're looking forward to in this industry? Or something like that to give you more questions to ask about. Um, you have 30 more minutes. There's another question. I'm not sure if I'm understanding this correctly, but the question asks, how does one start to change/redesign the team's communication style, especially if you're more junior, or maybe like how if someone is more junior in the industry, what are some like tips you can give them in communicating with the rest of their team?
So let's use recording short videos of yourself as an example. I found this to be a very effective way to, let's say we're doing a design review. I've made a design, I want feedback from the rest of my team. Let's say my team is global. The old way of doing things is to schedule a meeting late at night, early in the morning for the other person. And we do a critique, right? It's live. We're all sitting on a Zoom call. We're looking at design probably for the very first time, and then we're asking them to give feedback. Now, let's say the new thing that you want to try is to actually do a critiques asynchronously. The key here is a lot of times you don't have to ask for permission to try something new. People think like, oh, I don't want my boss to scold me for trying to do something differently. But if it's low cost, low effort, why not give it a go? You can always try it out. Record a short video of yourself presenting your design. Keep it short. Send it to people that you want feedback from, and they can give you feedback in their own time. Sometimes we think that we have to ask for permission before we're allowed to do certain things. But if it's low effort, low risk, you can try. You can try changing those things. Sometimes it's simple, it's like, I don't like having to scream or shout over somebody else in order to be heard. There's probably other people within your team in your meetings that you have that also feel the same way. You can always talk to them about it. And then over time, it becomes not just yourself, it becomes yourself and another person and another person. And slowly, intentionally, you are trying to shape how your team actually operates. That's some of the ways that you could try if maybe you feel like you're not the most senior person in the room, but you want to try and change things.
Mhm. Thanks for sharing. I guess like last question, I know we're on time, is how do you enable conversations in a shy crowd? Or like what are your
Sometimes
general questions you like to ask people to spark a conversation? There's people not really initiating it.
I actually like that first question. So when you're with a quiet group of people, the thing is, when you're actually quiet, when you think about the people that you're most comfortable with, it might be your closest friends or your family. The truth is, when you're around them, you don't always have things to talk about. Sometimes you can be very comfortable in that silence. The problem is that when you're with people that you don't know, it feels a lot more awkward because you don't really know them. So the funny thing is, if you're in a group with shy people and people who are just a lot more quiet, just being able to be in their presence, being together and being quiet together, it sounds funny, but if you're actually comfortable, you can make it feel comfortable or being quiet together. You actually simulate some kind of connection. And then you can, maybe an interesting question will come up about what's happening around you at the time. Maybe it's the music that's playing, maybe it's the food that's being shared. When something interesting comes up, you can talk about that. But don't feel the pressure like you're being in the moment and you have to say something because that's where that awkward feeling comes from. So get comfortable with being used to being silent for other people around you, and that can help.
Mhm. Thanks for sharing. Anything else you would like to share with our community here, Tim, before we wrap up?
I think that's it. Maybe the last thing I'll put out on the screen again. Again, for design buddies, for the people that have RSVP, I'm offering out 2 free scholarships to interviews for introverts. It's an online course. Scan your QR code, apply for it. Let me know a few more details about what you're going through. I can't give out too many scholarships at the time. It's really on a pay forward basis. You get to attend the course for free right now. Once you do get a full-time job, you can pay back and help somebody else. So scan the QR
Mhm.
code if this sounds interesting to you.
Thanks for sharing. I'll send the details over email after this as well. And thanks so much for taking your time to chat with us. I really enjoyed our topic, and I feel like it is very helpful for our introvert buddies and anyone looking to make for influence without having to change their personality in the crowd. So thanks so much, Tim, and have a wonderful morning.
Thank you, Grace. Thanks for the opportunity. Speak soon.
Thank you. All right, stream is